Can President Trump recover his tumultuous second quarter and win in November? That question and more today on Cure America with Star Parker. Henry Olsen, a scholar from the Ethics and Public Policy Center here in Washington, D.C., has a well-deserved reputation for on-target analysis on politics and elections. Olsen just published a column in the Washington Post entitled "Trump May Be Down, but He Is Not Out, at least not yet." The bottom has fallen out of President Trump's approval ratings. Most recently, Gallup reports his approval at 39%, down 10 points from a month before. And according to Olsen, by conventional analysis, the outlook for a Trump victory in November is not good. In fact, he said presidents that have polled this poorly less than 5 months before Election Day have always lost. But how useful is conventional analysis now? President Trump is not a conventional figure, and these are not conventional times, and his polling has been like a roller coaster since he was elected. The standard re-election campaign refrain is, "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" But President Trump ran on the theme, "Make America Great Again." So I'm wondering, voters may ask in November, is America greater today than it was 4 years ago? But here again, there might be reason of concern for the Trump administration, because another new Gallup poll shows the percentage of Americans saying they're extremely or very proud of their country is the lowest ever. Today, 63% of Americans say they are extremely or very proud. This is 18 points lower than where it stood 4 years ago. Gallup also reports that only 20% of Americans are saying that they are satisfied with the direction of the country. Just 4 months ago, in February, it stood at 45%, the highest it stood in 15 years. The first big drop in satisfaction occurred following the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Then from May, it dropped 12 more points following the death of George Floyd. Last February, the economy was surging as Donald Trump's approval rating was surging too. Unemployment, including Black unemployment, was at an all-time low. But now Trump is being tarred with COVID-19 and racial unrest. Can light enter this dark tunnel? Well, we'll discuss these questions and a few more with my very special guest, Mr. Henry Olsen, and my distinguished panel today on Cure America with Star Parker. Black Lives Matter is a political movement, and it arose out of a real concern in the Black community. In fact, it's one of the reasons that Blacks vote Democrat. When you look at the polling data on safety and security issues, for white and Blacks, they're exactly the opposite. Whites trust their local and do not trust the feds. Blacks are exactly the opposite. They trust the feds and they do not trust the local. We have to ask yourself why. Well, the history. These are different experiences. And one of the challenges that we've had as African Americans is that we have unionized police forces now. For 100 years, the country said don't unionize your public servants. They're public servants. But now they're not. They're unionized employees. So what happens when you put unionized employees, which the nature of unions is that the poor get the rookies and the rebels. And you put that up against broken family life, big guys with a whole lot of energy and no dad to channel it. This is an explosion, and this is what has happened in our society. You put these two together, it doesn't work very well. So there is a concern in Black communities when it comes to raising boys. The challenge is it's politicized. Anytime you don't address a problem, nature so abhors a vacuum, someone will fill it, and that's what's happened. So you now have this whole movement of Black Lives Matters that is out to destroy this country as a result of their philosophy, and you have a vacuum on the other side because we don't even talk about it. I'm glad you're staying with me because we have a very special guest to talk about Donald Trump, his presidency seems like it might be in a little bit of trouble, but he keeps bouncing back. And so my very special guest today is Mr. Henry Olsen. Henry Olsen is a senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, known here in Washington, D.C. as the EPPC.org. And he's an opinion columnist for the Washington Post. Thank you for joining us today. Let me tell them a little bit about the Ethics and Public Policy Center. It's a conservative think tank here and an advocacy group. It was founded in 1976 that describes itself as dedicated to applying the Judeo-Christian moral traditions to critical issues of public policy and our nation's founding principles, such as a rule of law, which you've heard a lot about lately with the police issues in the paper. Dr. Olsen's work has been featured in many prominent publications, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, National Review, The Guardian, and the Weekly Standard. One of the reasons that he's my very special guest today on this volatile topic that we are discussing is his predictions of the 2008, 2008, 2010, 2012, 2014, 2016, and 2018 elections were particularly praised for their remarkable accuracy. I mean, all of them, from 2008, every single election, everyone was looking at Mr. Olsen and what he was saying about them. In the 2016 campaign, he accurately identified the factors fueling the rise of Donald Trump early in the race, and his pre-election predictions were among the most articulate, the most accurate of any of the major analysts and commentators. And so we are very pleased to have Dr. Olsen as our very special guest today here on Cure America with Star Parker. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, Star.
Well, thank you for being here. And I think 5 months out of the election, we want to know, well, inquiring minds want to know. And you published an article in the Washington Post the other day that was entitled, "Trump may be down, but he is not out, at least not yet." And it implied that there's a possible surge again for his presidency. So he has survived Russiagate, he survived impeachment, but can he survive COVID-19 and now the racial unrest in the country?
He can, but he doesn't have much time to do it.
Okay.
What Trump's ratings have shown since at least the middle of 2016 is he says something that annoys people, or the Access Hollywood tape is released, and his ratings go down. His job approval or his head-to-head rating. And then within a month or so, when the news fades, they pop back up again. Mm. That's been the case for 5 years. And I think a lot of people in this town who would love to see him gone say, well, this is finally the time we got him.
Right.
And maybe it's so close to the election or COVID was so important that that's true, but his pattern for 5 years has been wait a couple of weeks and he pops back up. And if we start seeing that in July on the back of a strong economy and perhaps less verbal missteps from him, this is going to be a horse race.
Well, I don't know about the less verbal missteps because he loves his Twitter, but on your other point about the economy, it's already seeming to bounce back. What is it? You've been assessing candidates and political for quite some time. McCoby did a book about the productive narcissist, and he talked about these personalities that kind of have that bounce back. Is that what we have with Donald Trump?
Well, I think Trump, there was an old commercial for a children's toy when I was young, Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. And I think Donald Trump is somebody who can wobble, but just bounces right back up all over the place. And he's just a person who doesn't believe in quitting and doesn't believe in giving up. So he will fight going down to the last. I think with the economy, what we're seeing is we had the economy placed in an induced coma to stop COVID, and slowly we're bringing the patient back. And when the patients bring back to life, you start seeing signs of life.
Right.
And people want to go out and socialize. People want to go out, be safe, but be normal. And that's showing up in the employment figures. It's showing up in the retail sales figures. And I think we'll see much better numbers coming out in early July.
Now, you mentioned the irritation here in Washington. I mean, he is upsetting the apple cart. When he came in, he wanted to drain the swamp. We haven't seen much draining, especially of late, with the excessive spending. But why is he able to annoy on one hand, but then fix on the other? What's going on deeper than his...
Well, I think, first of all, a lot of the things he says really anger or infuriate the nostrums of the ruling classes here, which, as we've seen, includes many Republicans who were used to be people who would say we're opposed to the Democrats, but when it meant real change, well, it turns out they weren't really opposed to the Democrats. Right. And then you've got the fact that the president is not the most articulate person in the way that Washington's used to being articulate. He's not
Right.
genteel. They
Right.
like to say that in New York they stab you in the front, in Washington they stab you in the back.
Right.
Well, he stabs you all over.
Right, he
And they
does.
just don't like it
But
very much.
I think, though, the
But
grassroots
he
likes
does.
it. Yeah.
The grassroots likes a lot of it.
Yeah.
And the fact is, he has very firm principles. He's got a capable
Yeah.
staff around him, which means that
Yes, he does.
things can keep happening, even as there's turmoil in his life. There's change happening underneath, and we're seeing many beneficial things happen as a result of his presidency.
I have to keep you over for the panel because you mentioned this turmoil, and we have to exploit it because some have called him a chaos president. So we're going to talk about that with my panel right after this.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got my pillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented MyPillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now to give you deep discounts, not just on my pillows, but also my mattress toppers, sheets, and so much more. For example, you can get body pillows regularly $89.99, only $29.99 with your promo code. With our 60-day money-back guarantee, you have nothing to lose. Sleep well, America!
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com.
I'm wondering the impact of COVID-19 and now the racial unrest on the re-election of President Trump. So I hope you're wondering as well, because that's what we're going to talk about. I want to know from my distinguished panel, what is going on? This roller coaster ride that we've been on since 2016, but now in 2020, it is on steroids. So I have my distinguished guest panel again, Dr. William Allen. Hello.
Howdy.
Chief Operating Officer of the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Mr. Richard Manning, hello, President of Americans for Limited Government and co-author of the new book, Necessary Noise, How Donald Trump Inflames the Cultural War and Why This is Good News for America. And our special guest interview who's stayed over, Mr. Henry Olsen. Thank you for staying over on this panel, who is a senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center and a opinion columnist for the Washington Post. You might want to check out the Ethics and Public Policy Center. It's eppc.org because they have some very fascinating information there that would be consistent with your worldview, so that you will be very, very brief on what's going into this election and other things that you really need to know happening in our culture. So thank you for being here with us as well. Well, guys, it is a roller coaster. This second quarter blues has taken a toll on the president in the polls. And so since you're our special guest, Mr. Olsen, I'd like for you to address the question, can he survive? You mentioned earlier in our interview that it's going to be interesting. He's survived other things, but now let's look at it from a policy perspective. They have increased the role of government under the Trump administration, like as if we were still in the Obama administration almost, and or the Bush administration. So people are not going to be able to judge on whether he did his political promise of draining the swamp. What will he run on? What will he have to go into November and win?
Well, I think he's going to be running on not Biden, not
Oh,
the crazy
okay.
left, and that's important.
Okay.
I think he's going to be trying to run on the candidate who can balance racial justice with law and order.
Okay.
And I expect we will have a much larger economic bounce back than most of the media think, and I think he will try and take all the credit possible for that.
Wait,
And-
elaborate on the racial balance.
Well, I think what Trump has tried to do is demonstrate sympathy for the murdered victims.
Mm-hmm.
He signed a executive order on police reform,
Right.
and I think he was clearly trying to demonstrate a sympathy with the African American community through things like prison reform.
Right.
And I think he's going to try and do that. The media will try and keep him off of that.
Right.
But I think his strategy is going to be saying, look, I'm the person who's trying to change your life on the ground, and I'm the person who's trying to help your life on the ground versus a party that talks a game but doesn't deliver. Now, the media is going to try and get him off that, but I think that's what Trump is going to have as one of his themes, and we will see if he's able to pull it off.
Well, we'll see. But Dr. Allen, do you think it'll be enough, especially trying to make the case that he is the president for African American interests?
I don't think so quite, though I certainly see a lot of optimism on the part of some people in that area. But as I look at politics in general, what usually happens running up to an election is you see a great outbreak of opportunism, where the adversaries are looking for missteps that they can exploit.
Right.
Now what we're seeing is a little different, and that is a pattern of destruction. And whether there are missteps or not, you're going to have a consistent drumbeat which has no purpose in mind other than to destroy Donald Trump.
Right. Well, they've been a little bit successful. Richard, you know the pulse of the people that elected him. That's when we met, is when that groundswell of the Tea Party said, enough of this, we want our country back, and the Make America Great Again slogan helped get him into the White House. Will he survive? What's going on now in the minds of those that were expecting him to deliver to drain this swamp?
I think, first of all, that Donald Trump will win. I think he'll win pretty handily, and the reason is the other side's running on defunding police, and nobody wants that, okay?
Right.
The bottom line is they will not be able to run away from, in this digital age, they will not be able to run away from defund the police. Only 55% of the Democrats support defund the police. They barely get a majority within their own party.
Yeah, but they're going to pass a bill, and it'll probably be bipartisan, so they'll be able to say, no, we didn't really want to defund the police. That was just a fringe. So,
Well,
I mean,
passing
we're
a bill in
5 months away.
Passing a bill in Washington, D.C. is a lot different than when people are watching buildings burn down on
Yes,
those TVs. And that's an indelible mark that's been made. And all those people remain silent. It's not saying that the rioting was wrong. Okay? Didn't have to take on the protesters in some legitimate protests. But they didn't say the rioting was wrong. Those people were silent. Those people are going to pay a political price. And that's why a Joe Biden, who effectively sat in his basement and watched it go by, is not going to be the president, because he's not a leader. He didn't step up in any way, and everybody knows it.
Well, he came out now, and boy, is he sleepy, for sure. But he was making a statement today, and I'm wondering, after we saw a lot of drama in the 60s, we then saw the election that wanted a calm, and we ended up with Gerald Ford. And so I'm not sure that after all of this chaos, that people won't vote for Biden. I'm just not sure. He's high in the polls right now.
I'm going to disagree with my friend here. I think Biden's entering as a strong favorite. There's a lot of people who might agree with a Trump agenda, but have real problems with him. He's consistently been at or over 50% job disapproval since his presidency. And no president has won from such a depth where he is at in the history of modern polling, going back over 6 decades. I'm not going to say it's impossible, because we've seen him do impossible things before, and Biden's not a strong candidate. But you have to look and say, Americans of the middle who decide elections have tended to look at Donald Trump and say, this isn't the man we want to see leading the White House. And it's Trump's challenge to change their minds in the next 3 months.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if he can do that, because in his second term, people are already suspicious, because that's when presidents have been known to really go a little bit over the edge. And Biden seems to be popular, even though he hasn't said much, and most people know what he believes, which is horrible progressivism. But why is he holding?
I don't think it's sticking what Joe Biden believes. I think Joe Biden ought to be understood as not Donald Trump. And that's the only thing he has going for him.
Okay.
But I think it's overly sanguine to think that that cannot win.
Right.
I think people need to pause and understand the gravity of the situation that we now face. We can see greater division, even than we presently fear, over the course of the next few months. We can see a deeper division in the culture and society, and we can see people throwing up their hands. And if that happens, the results of any election are totally unpredictable. Throw your polls out the window, throw your history out the window.
I have to agree with you. In fact, that's why I brought up Gerald Ford. It was like people wanted a calm, and they would have voted for anyone. They didn't care what it meant. And you have a scripture that says that even a fool seems wise if he just keeps his mouth shut. And even though I still believe that they are not going to have him during the convention, he's going to give it up, and we're going to end up with maybe the governor of New Jersey. What do you think?
I've been on record. I don't think we'll get the governor of New Jersey.
Who would it be?
They were really hoping Cuomo wouldn't have put all the sick people into the senior centers and causing
because that's
a
what
lot
they
of
would have tried him.
Because he was the guy they were grooming. But but let me just clarify why Donald Trump, why I think Donald Trump's going to win. Number one, the case he makes is before China unleashed a virus on us, which most people believe China's culpable, we had the best unemployment rate in history. Right. We had the fewest number of people unemployed in this country since the year 2000, when there were more than 14 million more people in the workforce. So we had the best of all worlds in terms of the economy, and it was growing. It wasn't growing rapidly, but it was growing in a way that was sustainable. And people were getting jobs, people were regaining hope, and they were put on hold because of this virus.
Right.
And so they don't blame Donald Trump for it's really about 21 million.
Well, I don't know now. The polling is not showing that they're not blaming Donald Trump. So you're the predictor. Correct. What are you thinking about here? Let
me disagree with the polling thing first, though.
Okay.
People, based on how they perceive they're going to be treated, they go up and down based on their Donald Trump rating. Okay, people who are sitting there saying, well, I don't want to be cancel cultured. I'm not going to say it to a stranger over the phone, but behind the ballot
that happened in 2016. That's exactly what happened. All right, so let me ask this, Mr. Olsen. Henry, my new friend. 5 months out, you're the predictor. Is he going to pull it out? And if you say maybe he could, what does he need to do that?
Anyone who predicts an election 5 months out is somebody whose prediction isn't worth listening to.
Oh, come on, gamblers.
You got to do
Vegas. Just pretend we're in Vegas.
Yeah, in Vegas, I play the odds and I count cards.
But what would he need to do to recover from what we're seeing now with this
volatility? The president's challenge has been the same since his presidency, which is expand from the 47% of people who voted for him, many of whom did so reluctantly, that 18% of Donald Trump's vote had an unfavorable opinion of him on Election Day of 2016.
Wow.
What he needed to do throughout his presidency is turn those people into fans and convert about 3 or 4% of the rest of America into people who will at least tolerate him. He has, to this date, not done that.
But he has increased the number of people that watch news, Dr. Allen. I mean, is there a fascination? Is this some celebrity in this? And even though we hated him, we want him?
Yeah, he has done that much. But remember, too, there were people who didn't vote for him then, who, after the election, were in fact moved to support him and to support the momentum.
Yes.
So he does have that element, which is now uncalculated. On the other hand, it's entirely conceivable that what's going to happen is people at the end of the day are not going to decide on the basis of these sanguine expectations about their comfort, materially or otherwise. They're going to decide in an atmosphere of fear. And in that atmosphere, be careful about what you expect and predict. Remember, there was once again a lockdown in this country. The entire economy was shut down once before. Right. People don't remember that today because it happened 230 years ago.
Oh, wow.
At the revolution.
Oh.
There was a complete lockdown.
Okay, and we recovered,
Well, we recovered, but what did we have to go through?
Oh, that doesn't sound very hopeful. But I'm just wondering then, Richard, the outreach of the grassroots, we're seeing a lot of tension and anger in the people that are thinking that it's just not fair that he doesn't get a chance to make his case. Are they going to be disruptors in this next election, or are they going to be, let's get out more to vote for him?
Well, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, he announced he's going to have a rally on the 20th of July. And 900,000 people to 1 million people signed up for a 19,000-seat arena. I think that speaks pretty heavily as to where his supporters are. Now, whether or not that translates beyond his supporters remains to be seen. But once again, the key element to what happened with Donald Trump in the employment market was about 4.5 to 5 million people who had given up on having a job, who had left the economy entirely. Okay. They came back into the economy because the economy that Donald Trump was credited with creating. And because of that, if the economy rebounds, as I think we think it will, at least in those states which are not shut down, if the economy rebounds robustly in those states that have been opened up dramatically, then those people can be appealed to and say, you want hope? We have to get to where we were in February. If you want the same old stuff and be stuck in your basement, Vote for the other
Go
guy.
for the other guy. So what you're saying is that as that economy starts to tick up, as people go back to work, we're looking at the expiration of this unemployment benefit that was from the federal government. Is this going to have an impact on then people getting back to work and then saying, hey, I kind of like the direction of the country? Because he's down right now where it says, I like the direction of the country.
No, I think that the more the economy bounces back and the more we get back to normal, the more it's going to help Donald Trump. The question is
just
it
about
going
the
to be enough given that he has not been able to persuade a majority of Americans to think well of him at any point throughout his presidency? And that remains to be seen.
This kind of bothers me that we would rest it on whether his likability as opposed to what's best for the country. Don't you think that it should be what's best for the country? You have like 10 seconds to tell
But
me.
it's not his likability. Just think of the billions being expended to destroy him. Start with Bank of America, run through Starbucks. I can name a whole list of them. This is not the usual political campaign.
No, it
This is an
isn't.
unusual
That's
situation.
right. And you do the conventional, so
Exactly
you're right. I tell you, we're going to not solve this right now, but we'll have another panel that we'll continue the discussion, but mostly about what he needs to do to get the black vote. There's been a lot of attention there, and as Richard brought up, the unemployment rates had come historically low for this particular community. Everybody was working, and now we had to stop. They're coming back, but we also had civil unrest due to racial questions. So right after this message, we'll ask some of these questions of our panel. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Franklin Graham. Right now, we're in Alaska unloading a hospital for COVID-19. But right now, our country is in trouble, and people are scared, people are afraid, and we see the violence and the injustices that are taking place. Only God can change this. This is a problem of the human heart, and we have sinned against God, and as a nation, we've turned our back on God. And I want you to know that God loves you, He cares for you, and He sent His Son, Jesus Christ, from heaven to this earth to take our sins. And if we'll confess them and repent, turn from them, and believe on His Son, Jesus Christ, God will forgive us and He'll heal our hearts. If you have never invited Christ into your heart, pray this prayer with me right now. Just say, God, I'm a sinner. I'm sorry, forgive me. I believe Jesus Christ is your Son. I want to trust Him as my Savior. I want to follow Him as Lord from this day forward forever. Amen. Call that number right now that's on the screen. We've got someone who will pray with you, talk with you, encourage you. God bless.
It seems President Donald Trump is in the hot seat this week with the COVID-19 still on the headline, with racial unrest on the headline. And so the Black community has been in the headline quite a bit during this whole presidency, ever since he asked, what do you have to lose? And then Blacks found out that they had a lot to gain with unemployment at its historical low, with criminal justice reform, many other things that have happened. But then it all came to a halt just over the last week, and President Trump's ratings tanked. So we want to talk about this. We want to talk about Republicans and do they need a contract with Black America? This is a relationship that keeps going up and down and doesn't go too far up before it goes crashing down. And just recently, Cal Thomas did a column and asked Newt Gingrich, because he was, I suppose, the architect of the contract with America for the general population, do Blacks need one from Republicans? And so that's what I want to ask my panel today. And so I have a very distinguished panel. Dr. William Allen is again with us, a Chief Operating Officer for the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Richard Manning is still with us. I don't know if you're going to keep staying with us, but these two are my regular recurring guest panelists, a co-author of Necessary Noise, a political consultant and president of Americans for Limited Government. And in my hot seat, a dear friend, I don't know if he's going to stay my friend, but Paris Denard. I've known him for a number of roles. He's just a pillar here and a voice here in Washington, D.C., and has been for quite some time. And right now, he is a senior communication advisor for Black Media Affairs for the National Republican Committee, which is also known as the RNC. He was actually just telling us how he's planning a little bit on the Tulsa, so you'll be leaving there for there. But thank you for joining us before you make that move to go out there and help make America great again. I thank you for being with us. This is a really good thing because you're inside and you know that the successes, in fact, you were, I believe, on transition as well in helping with formulating the plans for the president for Black outreach. When he won, Blacks 8% said, okay, others started saying, now we're listening, and you guys were able to pull it together for this particular community. But now we're seeing that unravel. Now we're seeing the left really hit hard. And so I'm wondering from you, what role does community relations actually play in getting Black people to trust not just Republicans, but this particular president?
It's a very good question, Star. Thank you for having me on your show. I think one of the things that people have to remember is that this president is one who listens. And from the very beginning, during the transition, the president transition team had over 80 or so African American organizations on both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican, at AEI. And they came and they said, we just want to listen. We want to know what are the agenda items that you think we should be focused on the first 100 days of the administration. That meeting was off the record, lasted about 2 hours. And from that very start, you saw the president's team at the White House move from campaign to actually governing and with policy and things that we've seen, that in a lot of the things that you named. When you fast forward to right now in terms of community engagement, the community engagement piece has always been critical because what we know is there is a filter. The filter of the mainstream media that is creating a false narrative about who the president is, what he believes, and who are the people that are surrounding him. And so what the engagement opportunities allow us to do is to educate about the litany of successes that the president has had, not just on criminal justice reform and opportunity zones and school choice, but in historically Black colleges and universities, which he's been a champion of. When you look at what the president has done, even during COVID-19, the things that the CARES Act has done to protect and to help the Black community, which is disproportionately impacted, we've got to get the word out. So that means going to Black newspapers and Black radio. That means showing up to the Black Economic Alliance, which I did with the chair of the Republican National Committee, Ron McDaniel. Yeah, that's what we have to do. We have to take the winning message and be on the offense.
Well, I'm hoping you're wearing bulletproof vests, but I'm wondering from Dr. Allen, is it working? Is this strategy working? Are they getting this message to those that need to hear it most? It doesn't seem like it. It doesn't look like it. And the polling is certainly showing that it's not working.
I'm sure it's working within the system, the familiar system of constituency group politics and outreach to communities that are excluded. Because what Black outreach means is Blacks are outside. And it's been a chronic problem now for many decades. And the fact that we continue to practice it tells us that we haven't grown up, we haven't learned. That's problematic. The Republican Party cannot advance its station within this society simply by aping the Democrat Party with respect to race and race referencing.
Yeah, that's interesting and fascinating, actually, because I hear often the president tries not to do that.
Yes,
he seems to
correct.
want to include all Americans in his languaging, but yet there is this insistence that we have to have particular outreach to this particular community based on their ethnicity, even with all the variations within that particular population. That's really interesting. So, Richard, I'm just wondering, how is this perceived from the white community when they hear about these messages of Black outreach, as if this is something that has to occur outside of what's good for the rest of the country?
Well, first of all, let me say President Trump's economic plan was great for everybody. Okay, so let's be clear. The best plan for any group is to have a job, and have a job that has hope, that isn't a dead-end job. And that's what President Trump's was his agenda. That's what his trade agenda was about. That's what a lot of the immigration policy was about. And because he took special care to make sure that Americans who were here were treated well and had an opportunity that others would have denied them, I think he gets great credit for that. Now, the question is...
Wait, hold your thought, because, let me let you go ahead. But you just said something that I want to mention about
in terms of how it's looked at, a lot of times it looks like pandering. And I'll go to one of the points you made. The historically Black colleges, that appears to people like me as a little bit of pandering, because we all look and we say a lot of colleges are going to struggle coming out of the being shut down for the last semester. We know a lot of small colleges may fail. And yet the president is saying, I'm choosing this set of colleges over generally helping the colleges as a whole. And it feels like that may be a pander, and it doesn't, and while it doesn't negate everything else, it just feels a little bit that way.
Because it's interesting, Paris, because the president himself, on Richard's point about jobs, and he just did this for everybody, and it really impacted that little one, that when he was asked, what are you planning to do now? Look at COVID, it has destroyed the Black community. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? He didn't say anything about Black outreach. He said, I'm going to reset the economy. And he left color out of it.
Yeah, that's because President Trump has had an inclusive economy. And so his policies are applicable to everyone. But the good thing about the president's policies, which are not the same for other administrations, is that it does have a disproportionate positive impact on the Black community. Because when you want to reduce taxes, when you want to reduce the regulatory burdens, it helps the Black community. When you have...
Especially the small businesses.
Especially the small businesses.
My goodness, some of the things that came out of the plan to recover the businesses were unique for those that are mom and pop, for those that are independent contractors. So you do have a good point there.
I mean, the fastest group of minority business owners are Black women. I mean, that's the fastest growing group. And so, you know, if there's a group of people who are taking advantage of a system that is there to give them opportunity, then you message to them to make sure that they know what the opportunities are there for them as well as for you and as for everybody else.
But do you think that that's all that this is? Or there seems to me, Dr. Allen, that there has been, what Richard is calling pandering, that there's some selectivity in one people group.
I think there are two dimensions to this issue, and they get confused. Assume that we were in a war. It would clearly be the case that defending the country benefits everybody. But it's not the case that sending off segregated troops is still to be recommended. So that's true with the economy also, and anything else. It's all right to support HBCUs if you do so for the simple reason that the greatest and disproportionately number of professionals, Black professionals, emerge from HBCUs throughout this entire country. That's reported in my book, Habits of Mind, and many other research reports. That's a reason for doing it that has nothing to do with mere referencing of race. But if it is just a nod to racial difference, then it is actually hurting us, not helping us. Just as it was hurt us to send segregated troops out to defend the whole country.
Well, does that need to be explained better? Because even with the historical Black colleges, I suppose I take issue because less than 8% of African Americans even attend them. So it does seem like the other 92% are just saying, well, what's wrong with us? We're Black too, and I'm just wondering if there needs to be more explanation about the why.
Let me clarify just very quickly. That 8% produces an astounding number of doctors, lawyers, Ph.D.s, out of all comparison to the other students, Black students going to schools elsewhere.
So should this be a part of the narrative? Was the question then?
Well, it is a part of the narrative. When you have the majority of Black lawyers and doctors and members of Congress all coming from HBCUs, you see that they have a tremendous role. HBCUs are different than the school I went to, Pepperdine University. Multi-million-dollar endowment, just fine private institution, but HBCUs are a congressionally defined entity, which the Congress
kind of like historical buildings.
Right, and so the Congress has always had a special designation for these schools because of the background, which prevented the government Blacks from going to learn. And so these schools were specifically created for the education of freed African Americans. And so they always have a historic designation to them and role in the Congress. But because they have a disproportionate impact on the national economy in a positive way, this is a reason why we should invest in them and make sure that they are supported and thriving, because if they go away, your Black professionals, your Black lawyers, doctors, educators are going to go away as well.
I'm wondering if we need to have discussions more about the racial components of these two communities, Richard, because there is a breakdown. You know, I have not bought this narrative that America is a racist country. It is not. And I do not believe that what we've seen over the last few weeks is because of race. I think it's more about power. But there are differences and questions when it comes to how we're best going to educate our children, how we're best going to see that everybody partakes in a healthy economy, in particular when it comes to business. What's missing? What should we be thinking about so that the two communities will be able to come together to say, we're much more concerned about the values that are being promoted from the differences in the parties than whether they're Democrat or Republican. Am I missing something?
Well, I think, first of all, there is a habit that's developed to be a Democrat voter, taken for granted. Joe Biden showed that and says, you're not black unless you vote for me.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, so he's demonstrated that the abject racism of assuming a vote and assuming that everybody is the same. You know, I'm a big believer in treating people as individuals. I'm a big believer that if you provide opportunity for people equally, you get rid of the things that get in the way, like the opportunity zones, getting rid of the things that get in the way of investment in communities.
Yeah, that was a great one.
At that point, what you get is people becoming stakeholders in America. And when people are stakeholders in America, it doesn't matter what color you are, because we're all Americans.
Right.
It's when we make everybody an other. And truthfully, our modern campaigns of micro-targeting makes everybody an other to somebody else. And as a result, we end up finding ourselves being treated as other, rather than being treated together.
I see you nodding. What do you?
That's the true religion.
That's just a yes and amen over there. Okay, so Paris, I have a question then. What do we have to look forward to in a re-election? Is there something that, to Richard's point, that let's get away from the other. Let's define ourselves as Americans. What do we need to do to make sure that those that are in our weakest communities, our distressed communities, understand that no, you guys are with this too. It's about all of us.
Yeah, I think if you go back to the president's inaugural
10 seconds, he told me you have. So
the president's inaugural address, he talked about the forgotten men and women of this country.
He sure did.
The forgotten men and women of this country are the people that are the least of these that we should look out for. And more and more is going to be about socioeconomic background.
Wow.
And that's going to include blacks, whites, Hispanics, everyone. America first means all Americans first.
That's interesting, thank you for that, because in our book, Richard and I did together Necessary Noise, we actually print the whole inaugural to let people know, here, if you have a problem with this president, go read what he said he was going to do. This was after the election. This had nothing to do. He could have become very, very angry. And he not only told us what he was going to do, he then said it again when he went to the Congress. He said it again in his first State of the Union. So you're absolutely right. And it's going to be interesting these next 5 months to see what you guys roll out over there at the RNC and other places to continue at least the discussions going. We're going to keep the discussions going too. I'll be right back.
Today, a student in public school will pray or lead a Bible study. Someone will share the gospel with a lost soul. Today, a pastor will preach boldly the truth of the scriptures without fear of the IRS. The body of Christ will be the salt and light in a darkened world to engage responsible biblical citizens. Today, the life of an innocent child will be saved, and a mother will experience the joy of a newborn baby. A distraught woman will find hope and choose life rather than death. Today, there is a strong voice defending God's created natural order of marriage and family. There is a defender of freedom in the courtroom and in the halls of Congress and in legislative bodies across the land. Today, a young girl by the name of Justina Pelletier will eat dinner with her family and sleep in her own bed. Today, all of this is possible because of the ministry of Liberty Counsel. People from all over America will find help and hope because of Liberty Counsel. The adversity they face will be turned into victory, case by case, law by law, person by person. Liberty Counsel is advancing religious freedom, the sanctity of human life, and the family through litigation, education, and public policy. In the midst of adversity, there is opportunity to glorify God and to restore the culture. And that is the mission of Liberty Counsel, to restore the culture by advancing life, liberty, and family.
Well, now we have to try to cure America. We have a lot of discussions, a lot of tension, and some things are just not answerable in one show. But we will try. This week's been a busy week here in Washington, D.C., with the Senate taking up police brutality, looking at federal oversight over local policing. So I want to talk to my next guest about that, if he thinks it's a good idea. In fact, you are already familiar with Pastor McNeill. Pastor Charles McNeill is the president of the National Capital Baptist Convention. He's a serving faith-based liaison for Prince George County in Maryland and a senior pastor of Unity Baptist Church, also here in Maryland. And he's been a guest with us before. And I really thank you for being here, in particular because you are also a former police officer here in Washington, D.C. And that is a very unique combination of, as you said last time, empathy to be able to identify in both places. So I am wondering about this federal oversight. You've been following a little bit about what's going on. What's next? What do we need to be thinking about? Is this a good idea to have the federal government come up with some ideas on how to control the police brutality that we've seen? And then what happens next?
Well, the federal mandate to control it is, I don't think that the federal part will be able to control it because every jurisdiction, every locality is of its own. And how would you report that? Who's going to be over that? So it looks like you're creating a whole nother entity within the government to monitor
that's what
that.
I was kind of concerned. But they did say that they were setting up like a hotline, I guess, so that if you're even thinking that might not be a good idea. Well, then what should happen?
Well, you're going to have to put more accountability on the officer, I think, and the supervisors. One of the things is
locally. Leave it local.
Yeah, I think you need to leave it local.
Okay.
And local and create pretty much a database for those bad cops who are misbehaving. And on a federal level, I think that would work. Because then that would be able to tell those officers who are bad ones will not be able to go from one jurisdiction to the next. So I think there should be some type of monitoring for that.
And accountability. Now,
accountability.
You are in the force. What broke down? Why is it that they're not able to govern and self-govern? Why are we seeing so many incidents of cops just thinking that they have license to go out and kill?
I think my father used to be a big Western type guy. So I think it's more that this John Wayne mentality. Folks pretty much like to think I'm the big guy. But I think the biggest part is culture.
Is that in recruitment into the police department? So you're saying a disproportionate number of men who are drawn to the police come with that tendency?
That type of ego, or either once they get in there, a gun has the ability to make you feel more emboldened.
Powerful and authority. And I like the fact that they have guns, but I'm then wondering, because this is interesting, when you look at the recruitment in the military, they are not looking for people that have a bad. So there must be something breaking down then in recruitment to be able to end up with so many officers and lack of accountability.
Well, I don't think you're going to be able to curtail people's behavior. But you can curtail it to a point where there's accountability.
Well, a lot of people are now pointing to the unions. They're saying that this is one of the challenges, and I've been saying that forever, because when you think about just the nature of unions, the poor communities actually get the rookies and the rebels, because seniority means something, and you get better, cushy job, and so now you're new or you need discipline. They can't be fired because the union won't let them, so they pass them off to these poor communities. Are we going to see any union reform?
Well, the union pretty much is made up of the cops, of the police officers. So if you change the uniform person, then you begin to change the union.
Wait, the union. So a police officer is a part of. He's in the union, but
he pays dues to the union.
He pays dues to the union, but the union is a separate entity that bids on their behalf. You're not saying that they are also police officers.
In some cases, they are.
So we're going to have the police themselves? This sounds a little bit deeper than something the feds could even try to
Well, when I was a cop here in D.C., the union president was an active police officer.
Okay, well then that might be one of the problems, that if we're going to have unions over our civil servants, which are police officers, who then pass rules that you can't live in the community that you police, that you have rules that say we can't fire you if you misbehave. This is this needs some type of reform. This sounds like a bad deal for the public that they say, hey, I'm sorry to indict your friends, but you say that you're trying to, police yourselves now.
Yeah.
And it sounds like if they're also the union, this might be problematic.
Well, I mean, if you think that you're in the union's not serving you properly, or if the union's doing something wrong, I always got out of a union that was not serving me. And if it did, it goes back to your morals and your ethics. That if the union wasn't serving me and I thought the union was bad, I would get out of the union. That's just me.
Well,
But
it shouldn't be just you
of-
now. We have to do this for our society. People are concerned, and we have a moment that we can actually make some reforms. They're trying to do it here in Washington, but I'm just wondering now, with the same culture purging God, it seems we should go right back to that question. Can we be good without God? Can police officers be good? Can anyone be good? Put the pastor hat on there.
Well, from a pastor's standpoint, we all are born with a double nature, good and bad. But I think as we come up through culture, it depends on which one that we side with. My ethics and my morals and my Christianity brought those good morals out. Not saying that we don't have them, but whenever I engage with people, I always look at people from the perspective of my faith. Do unto others as you would have others to do unto you.
But we have too many that don't do that. How do we have a civil society in a secular world? Is it even possible? Because individually you can say, well, I'll be good, but I'll be good, but those domestic terrorists that destroyed my neighborhood right here in Washington, D.C. were not being very good.
Well, I understand, and I think that that's where the law comes in. We have to be able to say, okay, if this is a bad group of people that's doing something, of course we have to meet force with force, and that's some stuff in the Bible as well. Biblically, when you look throughout the Bible, everything is not rosy and peaches. There was times when the people of God had to combat their enemies, when they had to destroy their enemies, when God told them to march forward and do certain things to their enemies. So in this civil world the world that we live in now, in order to be civil, there come times when the Bible tells there's a time for war, there's a time for peace, there's a time to die, there's a time to fight. We have to be able to state the times and look at the times. And
we know as a society we're in a cultural war. We're biblical and free, secular and statist, and that's what even this next election is about. Because if we do not have a moral framework as a society, then we do see the type of civil unrest that we have experienced over the last couple of weeks. And then on top of that, you're saying, and then the police can be corrupted too because they have no moral framework. It sounds perhaps we should do what de Tocqueville said: get back into the church.
Not all police.
I didn't say all.
Okay.
But what we are looking at is enough that are bad apples that the federal government now feels a role to step in. You started out saying that you don't think that that's a very good idea, but if people can't self-govern, and then the union is protecting that because the union is also a part of that, we might have a deeper cultural challenge than some are thinking. This might not be solvable through law.
I look at government from a local perspective, and I think that what we do locally dictates what we're going to do federally.
Okay.
So that means that now we must get engaged in our communities locally. And make sure that we're electing those mayors, those governors, and those persons locally that will represent us and be able to see what their agenda is before we elect them.
Can the image of police be changed in our most distressed zip codes to where we'll start seeing more young men say, I want to be a police officer, that then they change it from within?
Yes. When I was a kid, one of the things that I wanted to be was not a football player, not a basketball player, but it wanted to be a police officer or a firefighter.
And you became a pastor and a police officer. Well, I'm fascinated by Pastor McNeill, and we will continue this discussion on Cure America with Star Parker because it's just, we have to cure the country. So we will be looking at solutions for that. Thank you very much. I'll be right back.
All right.
If the Act passes in its current form as H.R. 5, then every right that women have fought for will cease to exist. H.R. 5 is a human rights violation. Every person in this country will lose their right to single-sex sports, shelters, grants, and loans. The law will forbid ever distinguishing between women and men. Male rapists will go to women's prisons and will likely assault female inmates. Female survivors of rape will be unable to contest male presence in women's shelters. Men will dominate women's sports. Girls who would have taken first place will be denied scholastic opportunity. Women who use male pronouns to talk about men may be arrested, fined, and banned from social media platforms. Girls will stay home from school when they have their periods to avoid harassment by boys in mixed-sex toilets. Girls and women will no longer have a right to ask for female medical staff or intimate care providers. Everything I just listed is already happening. And it's only going to get worse if gender identity is recognized in federal law.
Why are conservatives standing with liberals to strip women of their rights? America's women deserve better.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my guest today as much as I did here on Cure America with Star Parker. And the May jobs report was strong, showing a drop in unemployment and 2.5 million new jobs. The economy is starting to roar back. Most certainly, there will be some bipartisan legislation dealing with policing. Demonstrations can't go on forever, maybe in Seattle. But time plus action on policing could take the edge off of racial tensions. A sharp economic recovery and easing of racial tensions can produce a bounce back for President Trump, like he's seen in the past. He has been a roller coaster president, but he keeps coming back. And what motivated voters to go Republican in 2016 and swing 5 blue states red was the Make America Great Again message. Freedom in the marketplace and drain the swamp in Washington. The challenges are even greater now for these messages. We're looking at a $2 trillion plus deficit. National debt now stands at 110% of our GDP, highest since World War II. The answers to our COVID-19 recovery and our racial challenges are freedom. They must be in freedom. Only freedom will open the door to innovation and respecting the humanity of every citizen. It will be easy to go down an alternative road where the left wants us to go. They want to take us to more institutionalizing of massive surges of government to deal with COVID-19 and more government-mandated diversity programs as the answer to racial tensions. But this will bog us down with socialism and slow growth, hurting the very people we're supposed to help, or at least we say we want to help. Yes, we're facing different crises today. Very difficult, but dealing with the greatest crisis is the best way to deal with the other ones. The greatest crisis is choosing the right path for the nation's future. I declare that a path defined by freedom and a rule of law that respects the humanity of all and is carried out fairly and equally is the best path for us all and for our children's children. I'll see you again next week here on Cure America with me, Star Parker.